Big Ben. Big Ben chimes 11 on Remembrance Day 2023. Big Ben Clock, London, UK. The sky was covered with soft grey clouds, and a cool wind moved gently along the River Thames. The usual noise of traffic and hurried footsteps felt quieter than normal. It was Remembrance Day, and even before the clock reached 11, the mood of the city had already changed. Big Ben stood tall beside the Houses of Parliament, strong and calm. Its clock face was clear against the dull sky, and its presence felt comforting, like an old guardian watching over the city. For years, Big Ben had marked time for London, but on this day it meant something more. It was not just a clock. It was a symbol of memory, history, and respect. People began to gather early in the morning near Westminster. Some arrived alone, others with family or friends. Many wore small red poppies pinned to their coats. These poppies were simple yet powerful. They spoke without words. They showed that this day mattered. Some people walked slowly, their heads lowered in quiet thought. Others stood still, looking toward Big Ben as if waiting for it to speak. Among the crowd was an elderly man named Arthur. He moved carefully, leaning on a walking stick. His steps were slow but steady. He had been coming to this place every year for as long as he could remember. For Arthur, Remembrance Day was deeply personal. He had lost close friends when he was young, and though many years had passed, their faces still lived clearly in his memory. As he looked up at Big Ben, his eyes filled with emotion, not sadness alone, but a deep respect for the past. Not far from Arthur stood a young woman named Emily. She was a university student visiting London for her studies. This was her first Remembrance Day in the city. She had read about it in books and seen it on television, but being there felt very different. She noticed how quiet everyone was, how strangers stood together without speaking, connected by something unseen. Emily felt a strange mix of curiosity and respect. She knew this moment was important, even if she was still learning why. Across the street, a small family waited together. A father held his young son's hand while the mother stood close beside them. The boy asked quietly why everyone was so silent. The father bent down and explained in simple words that this day was about remembering people who had served and protected others. The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing that this was a serious and meaningful moment. He looked up at Big Ben with wide eyes, as if it were part of a story much bigger than himself. As the morning continued, the area filled with more people, yet the calm remained. There was no pushing, no loud talking, no rush. Tourists who usually took photos spoke in whispers. Even the birds seemed quieter. The air felt heavy, not in a negative way, but full of emotion and memory. It was as if the city had agreed to pause together. Big Ben remained silent for now, its hands moving steadily toward 11. Each passing minute brought the crowd closer to the moment they were waiting for. People checked their watches, then quickly put them away, as if time should be trusted to the clock tower alone. The sound of distant footsteps echoed softly, blending into the quiet rhythm of the morning. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he saw scenes from his youth, faces smiling, voices laughing, moments that were once ordinary but now felt precious. He did not speak. He did not need to. This place, this day, understood him. Around him, others carried their own memories, different stories, but the same feeling of respect. Emily noticed Arthur standing nearby. She could tell that this day meant something deep to him. Without speaking, she felt connected to him, even though they were strangers. This was the power of the moment. It brought together people of different ages, backgrounds, and experiences, joining them in quiet reflection. The clouds shifted slightly, allowing a soft light to fall over the clock tower. Big Ben looked almost golden for a brief moment. Some people lifted their heads, noticing the change. It felt like a sign, gentle and calm, reminding everyone why they were there. As the minutes passed, the silence became more meaningful. It was not empty. It was full of thoughts, memories, and respect. People were not just waiting for the chimes, they were preparing themselves for them. The sound of Big Ben at 11 was not just a signal of time. It was a voice of remembrance, and everyone knew it. Nearby, a group of visitors from another country stood quietly. They had planned their trip months ago, not knowing they would witness this moment. Though they did not share the same history, they felt the importance of the day. One of them whispered that this was something special, something they would remember long after they returned home. The River Thames flowed gently beside the crowd, reflecting the gray sky above. Boats moved slowly, respecting the calm of the morning. The water seemed to carry the city's reflection, holding both its past and present together. As the clock hands moved closer to 11, the quiet grew deeper. Conversations stopped completely. Phones were put away. Even those who had arrived with curiosity now stood with seriousness. Everyone's attention turned toward Big Ben. It was as if the entire city was holding its breath. Arthur straightened his posture, gripping his walking stick firmly. Emily folded her hands in front of her. The family held each other closer. Strangers stood side by side, united without words. The moment was almost here. Big Ben stood ready, silent but powerful. For centuries it had marked time, witnessed history, and watched generations come and go. On this morning, it was about to speak again, not just to tell the hour, but to remind everyone why remembering matters. And as London waited, still and respectful, the world around Big Ben seemed to fade away. There was only the quiet, the people, and the promise of the chimes that would soon echo through the city, carrying memory, honor, and meaning with every sound. As the morning moved forward, the area around Westminster slowly filled with more people. They arrived from different directions, walking across bridges, stepping off buses, or coming out of nearby streets. No one hurried. Everyone seemed to understand that this day required patience and calm. The city felt like it was breathing more slowly than usual. The crowd was made up of many kinds of people. There were elderly men and women who had lived through difficult times and carried memories that never fully faded. There were middle-aged adults who had grown up hearing stories from parents and grandparents. There were young people who had learned about this day in school but were now seeing its meaning in real life. And there were visitors from other countries, drawn by curiosity and respect. Arthur remained near the front, standing quietly. His poppy rested neatly on his coat. He remembered the first time he had come here many years ago. Back then, he was younger, stronger, and surrounded by friends who shared his past. Many of those friends were gone now, but their presence still felt close on this day. He believed that remembrance was not about sadness alone. It was about honor, respect, and making sure that sacrifices were never forgotten. A few steps away, Emily observed the crowd with thoughtful eyes. She noticed how people avoided loud movements, how even simple actions like adjusting a scarf or shifting weight were done gently. She felt a sense of responsibility, as if being there meant becoming part of something larger. She touched the small poppy she had bought earlier that morning and felt proud to wear it. Near the edge of the crowd stood a man named Daniel, a visitor from another country. He had traveled to London for sightseeing, but when he learned about Remembrance Day, he chose to be there. He did not know all the details, but he understood the idea of honoring the past. In his own country, there were days of remembrance too, and standing here made him feel connected to people across borders and histories. The police officers nearby stood calmly, guiding people with quiet gestures. There were no raised voices, no sharp commands. Everyone cooperated naturally. The shared respect made order easy. Volunteers offered help to those who needed a place to sit or directions to stand. Kindness moved quietly through the crowd, just like the cool morning air. As more people gathered, the space became fuller but never uncomfortable. Strangers stood close, yet no one felt crowded. There was an unspoken understanding that this was a shared moment. Some people held small programs in their hands, reading silently. Others simply stared ahead, lost in their own thoughts. The family with the young boy found a clear spot where they could see Big Ben. The boy looked around, noticing the serious faces of adults. He lowered his voice without being told. His mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and he stood still, copying the calm behavior around him. This quiet lesson would stay with him long after the day ended. Across the road, a group of veterans stood together. They did not speak much, but when they did, it was in low voices. A nod, a short smile, a simple greeting. These small gestures carried deep meaning. They shared an understanding that did not need explanation. Their presence reminded everyone why this day existed. Emily noticed the veterans and felt a deep respect. She realized that history was not just something written in books. It lived in people. It stood beside her, breathed the same air, and carried memories that shaped the present. She felt grateful to witness this moment. The sound of distant church bells faded as the time grew closer. Big Ben remained silent, waiting. Its stillness added to the feeling that something important was about to happen. People checked the clock face high above, trusting it more than their phones or watches. This clock had guided the city for generations. On this day, it guided hearts as well. Arthur adjusted his coat slightly as the wind brushed past him. He felt the cold but welcomed it. It kept him present, grounded in the moment. He thought about how many times he had stood in silence here, and yet each year felt different. Time changed people, but the meaning of remembrance stayed strong. Daniel looked around and noticed how even those who had come as tourists were now fully part of the moment. Cameras were lowered. Smiles were replaced with thoughtful expressions. The city had taught them how to behave without instructions or signs. Respect had become the common language. The river continued to move beside the gathering, calm and steady. Its surface reflected the buildings and the cloudy sky. It had seen centuries pass, just like Big Ben. Together, they held the stories of the city, flowing through time. A soft breeze carried the faint sound of footsteps from far away, but it did not disturb the peace. Conversations had nearly stopped. The closer it got to 11, the quieter everything became. It felt as if the city was slowly closing its eyes, preparing for a moment of deep reflection. Emily took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She felt nervous, not because of fear, but because of the importance of what was coming. She wanted to do everything right to show respect, even as a newcomer. Standing there, she felt proud to be part of this shared pause. Arthur looked up once more at Big Ben. The hands were close now. He straightened his back and placed both hands firmly on his walking stick. Around him, others did the same in their own way, standing taller, folding hands, bowing heads. No one gave instructions. The moment guided everyone naturally. The crowd was now completely still. The city noise had faded into the background. London, a place known for movement and sound, had become silent together. All eyes were turned toward the clock tower. The waiting itself felt meaningful. It was not empty time. It was full of thought, memory, and respect. Everyone was ready. The next sound would not just mark an hour. It would connect the past and the present, carried by the voice of Big Ben, echoing through the heart of the city. The moment arrived quietly, without warning, yet everyone felt it at the same time. The hands of Big Ben reached 11. For a brief second, the city seemed to stop completely, as if London itself was holding its breath. Then the first chime rang out, deep and steady, moving through the air like a slow wave. The sound was strong but gentle. It did not rush. It did not shout. It spoke with calm power. The chime traveled across the river, between buildings, over streets, and into the hearts of everyone standing there. People did not move. No one looked away. All attention was fixed on the tower as the sound filled the space around them. Arthur felt the vibration of the chime in his chest. He closed his eyes as the second chime followed the first. Each sound felt like a step back in time. With every chime, memories returned clearly. Faces of friends long gone appeared in his mind. He remembered laughter, shared meals, long talks, and quiet moments. The chimes did not bring pain. They brought respect and connection. Emily stood perfectly still. She had never heard a sound like this before. It was not just a bell ringing. It felt meaningful, heavy with history. She felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders, not as a burden but as a responsibility. She understood now why people spoke so carefully about this day. The sound explained everything words could not. The third chime echoed across the crowd. Even the smallest movement stopped completely. The young boy held his father's hand tightly, feeling the seriousness of the moment without fully understanding it. He looked up at the clock tower, his eyes wide, listening closely. This sound would stay with him, even if he could not explain why. Daniel stood quietly, his head slightly bowed. Though this was not his country, he felt deeply moved. The chimes reminded him of moments back home, of days when people gathered to remember and reflect. In that moment, borders did not matter. The sound of Big Ben connected everyone, no matter where they came from. The fourth and fifth chimes rang out slowly, evenly spaced, each one clear and strong. The city listened together. Cars had stopped. Pedestrians froze mid-step. Even the river seemed to slow its movement as if respecting the moment. London had become one body, one heart, listening as one. Arthur opened his eyes briefly and looked around. He saw young faces, old faces, faces from many cultures and backgrounds. All were silent. All were united by the sound. He felt a quiet pride knowing that remembrance had not faded with time. It had passed from one generation to the next. Emily felt tears gather in her eyes, surprising her. She did not try to wipe them away. She allowed herself to feel. The chimes made her think about people she had never met, lives she had never known, and choices she had never faced. Yet she felt close to them in this moment, connected through shared respect. The sixth chime rang, echoing off stone walls and glass windows. It felt like a voice from the past speaking to the present. The sound carried stories of courage, loss, and hope. No words were spoken, but everyone understood. As the seventh chime followed, a soft breeze moved through the crowd, lifting coats and scarves slightly. It felt gentle, almost comforting. Some people lowered their heads further, others closed their eyes. Everyone remained still. The eighth chime sounded steady and patient. Time felt different now. Seconds stretched longer, filled with meaning. This was not ordinary time. It was remembrance time, measured not by clocks alone, but by memory and respect. Arthur thought about how many times he had heard these chimes over the years. Each time was different, shaped by age and experience. Yet the feeling remained the same. The sound reminded him that remembering was not about living in the past. It was about carrying lessons forward. Emily felt her breathing slow naturally. She felt calm, grounded, and aware. She knew she would remember this sound for the rest of her life. Whenever she thought of London, this moment would come to mind before any other. The ninth chime echoed, strong and clear. The city remained silent, as if the sound itself demanded respect. Even those far away paused, hearing the echo through streets and open windows. For a few moments, time belonged to memory alone. The 10th chime rang, signaling that the moment was nearly complete. Some people pressed their hands together, others held their poppies gently. The sound felt like a promise, reminding everyone that remembrance would continue year after year. Finally, the 11th chime sounded. It was full and powerful, carrying the weight of history and the hope of peace. When it faded, the silence that followed felt just as important. No one rushed to move. No one broke the quiet. The sound had ended, but its meaning remained. The echo slowly disappeared into the distance, blending with the city's skyline. Big Ben stood tall and silent once more, having spoken its message clearly. It had not only marked the hour, it had reminded everyone why they stood there. Arthur lowered his head gently. His heart felt full. He knew that those he remembered were honored not just by him but by thousands standing together. That thought brought him comfort. Emily remained still, letting the moment settle inside her. She felt changed in a quiet way. She understood that some moments did not need explanation. They needed presence, respect, and silence. The crowd stayed frozen for a short while longer, allowing the meaning of the chimes to sink in. London did not rush forward. It allowed space for reflection. Big Ben watched over them, steady and calm. The sound of 11 chimes had passed, but the memory of it would stay alive in every heart that listened. After the final chime faded into the distance, the silence that followed felt even deeper. It was not an empty silence. It was full of thought, emotion, and respect. This was the beginning of the 2 minutes of silence, a time when the whole city paused together. London, usually full of sound and movement, now stood still. People did not shift their feet or adjust their clothes. Even breathing felt softer. The silence wrapped around everyone like a gentle blanket. It felt safe, calm, and serious at the same time. This silence was not forced. It was chosen, shared, and understood by all who stood there. Arthur bowed his head slightly. He had done this many times before, yet it never felt routine. In the quiet, his thoughts became clearer. He remembered moments from long ago, walking alongside friends, sharing jokes, making plans for the future. Some of those plans were never fulfilled, but their meaning lived on. In this silence, Arthur felt close to those memories, not in pain but in deep respect. Emily closed her eyes gently. She had never experienced such a powerful silence before. It felt louder than any sound. Thoughts moved through her mind slowly. She thought about how easy it was to forget the past in daily life, and how important it was to stop and remember. Standing there, she felt grateful for this pause, for this chance to reflect. The young boy remained still beside his parents. He did not fidget or whisper. He sensed that this moment was important. The silence taught him something words could not. It showed him that respect could be quiet, and that remembering did not always need talking. Daniel stood with his hands loosely folded. He felt honored to be part of this moment, even as a visitor. The silence felt familiar, reminding him of similar moments in his own country. He realized that remembrance was a shared human experience, crossing borders and languages. In the quiet, he felt connected to everyone around him. Across the area, veterans stood straight and still. Their faces were calm, serious, and thoughtful. The silence held their stories gently. No one needed to ask them what they remembered. Their posture, their presence, spoke clearly enough. The River Thames continued to flow, its movement slow and steady. The water reflected the stillness of the sky above. Boats had stopped or moved quietly, respecting the moment. The city and the river seemed to agree on the importance of these minutes. Time felt different during the silence. Seconds passed slowly, stretching into something deeper. There was no rush to reach the end. Everyone allowed the moment to unfold naturally. The city trusted the silence to do its work. Arthur felt the cool air on his face and welcomed it. It kept him present. He felt thankful that the city still remembered, that younger generations stood beside him in respect. The silence gave him comfort, knowing that the past was not forgotten. Emily felt her thoughts settle. She was not thinking about studies, plans, or daily worries. She was fully present. The silence helped her understand that remembrance was not only about the past, but also about the choices people make today and tomorrow. Some people in the crowd quietly reflected on loved ones they had lost, not only those remembered on this day, but personal losses as well. The silence allowed space for all kinds of memories. It did not judge or limit thoughts. It welcomed them. The wind moved gently through the crowd, brushing coats and scarves. No one reacted. Even nature seemed to move carefully, respecting the stillness. Birds remained quiet and the distant city sound stayed far away. Daniel noticed how people from different cultures stood side by side without discomfort. The silence made everyone equal. Titles, jobs, and backgrounds faded away. Only humanity remained. Arthur felt a sense of peace settle inside him. He knew he could not change the past, but he could honor it. These 2 minutes mattered. They reminded him that remembrance was an act of care passed on through time. Emily felt proud to stand there, sharing the silence with strangers who felt like companions in that moment. She realized that some experiences were meant to be felt, not explained. This was one of them. As the 2 minutes slowly came to an end, no one rushed to move. The silence did not break suddenly. It softened, preparing everyone to return to the present moment. People remained still for a heartbeat longer, as if unwilling to let go. The city waited together, allowing the meaning of the silence to settle deeply. Big Ben stood tall and quiet, watching over the crowd. The silence had spoken clearly, leaving behind understanding, respect, and a shared sense of remembrance. When the moment finally began to fade, the feeling remained. The 2 minutes of silence had passed, but their impact stayed strong in every heart that had stood still together. Slowly, gently, the silence began to loosen its hold on the city. It did not end suddenly. Instead, it softened, like a deep breath being released after a long pause. People did not move right away. They allowed the final feeling of stillness to settle inside them, knowing that this moment deserved care even as it passed. Arthur lifted his head slightly. His eyes remained calm, thoughtful. He did not feel rushed to leave. He never did. For him, the end of the silence was not an ending at all. It was a quiet reminder to carry remembrance forward into everyday life. He adjusted his coat, feeling the familiar weight of the poppy pinned there, and took a slow breath. Emily opened her eyes and looked around. The crowd was still mostly quiet, but there was a gentle shift in posture and movement. People stood a little straighter, some turning their heads softly, others taking a careful step back. She felt different from when she had arrived that morning. Nothing dramatic had changed, yet something inside her had settled into place. The young boy squeezed his father's hand once more and looked up. His father gave him a small nod and a warm smile. No words were needed. The boy understood that something important had happened. Though he might not remember every detail, the feeling of standing still in that moment would stay with him, shaping how he understood respect in the future. Daniel glanced toward the clock tower one last time. Big Ben stood tall and steady, just as it always had. Yet now it felt more personal to him. He knew that whenever he heard its name again, he would remember this day, this silence, and the shared stillness of thousands of people standing together. Gradually, quiet sounds returned. Soft footsteps touched the ground. A few low voices spoke gently, careful not to break the calm too sharply. The city did not rush back into noise. It eased itself forward, respectful even in movement. Some people began to leave, walking slowly away from Westminster. Others stayed a little longer, wanting to hold on to the feeling for just a few more moments. No one pushed. No one hurried. It felt as though the city had learned patience from the silence. Arthur took a few careful steps forward. His body was slower than it once had been, but his mind felt clear. As he walked, he passed young people, families, visitors, and veterans. He felt comforted knowing that remembrance did not belong to one generation alone. It lived on through shared moments like this. Emily walked alongside the flow of people, her thoughts calm and steady. She knew she would call her family later and tell them about this experience. She would not rush to explain it. She would choose her words carefully because some moments deserved thoughtful telling. Nearby, volunteers quietly collected programs and helped guide people safely along the paths. Their actions were simple but meaningful. They understood that service did not always require attention. Sometimes it meant supporting moments like this from the background. The River Thames continued its steady movement, reflecting the buildings and the soft light of the sky. Boats slowly returned to their paths. The city's rhythm resumed, but it felt gentler, as if London itself had been changed, even if only for a short while. Daniel paused to look back once more before leaving. He felt grateful, not just for witnessing a historic moment, but for feeling included in it. He had arrived as a visitor, but he was leaving with a sense of connection. The experience reminded him that remembrance was not limited by place. It lived wherever people chose to pause and reflect. As people moved farther away, conversations slowly returned, but they were quieter than usual. Laughter was soft, voices respectful. The mood of the day stayed with them, shaping how they spoke and moved. Arthur reached a bench and sat down to rest. He watched the people pass by, feeling content. He thought about how each year brought new faces, new stories, and new understandings. Time moved forward, but remembrance stayed steady, carried in moments like this. Emily stopped for a moment near the bridge and looked out over the water. She felt thankful for the chance to experience something so meaningful. She knew that busy days would return, but she also knew she could return to this feeling whenever she needed perspective. The young boy asked a quiet question about the clock, and his parents answered gently. They explained that Big Ben would continue to ring every day, but this moment would always be special. The boy nodded, satisfied, holding onto the memory in his own way. Big Ben remained behind them all, strong and calm. It did not need to speak again to be heard. Its earlier chimes had already done their work. They had reminded the city and the world of the importance of remembering. As the crowd thinned, the streets slowly returned to their familiar flow. Buses moved, shops opened wider, and daily routines continued. Yet something invisible remained in the air, a shared understanding that some moments deserved to be honored before moving on. Arthur stood up once more and joined the path home. His steps were slow, but his heart felt steady. He carried the day with him, just as he had done for many years, and just as others would do in years to come. Emily blended into the city's movement, feeling more connected to London than ever before. She realized that remembrance was not about standing still forever. It was about moving forward with care, awareness, and respect. Daniel walked on, knowing that this day would remain one of the most meaningful parts of his journey. He had not planned for it, but it had become unforgettable. Behind them, Big Ben continued to watch over the city, marking time as it always had. Life moved on, but memory remained. And every year, when the clock reached 11 on this day, the city would pause once again, reminding everyone that remembering mattered and always would.